Hello, everybody, and welcome to One Day Today. We are on episode 57. I had a really amazing last week. My birthday was yesterday, so thank you all for all the wonderful birthday wishes. I am really excited for what's in store this next year. And I mean, even with everything happening in the world, every day we have this stage, I'm just reminded, you know, what beauty there is out there and how many amazing people there are doing amazing work. And, I'm just kind of reminded, doing a lot of reflecting this weekend. And I was really like sitting like, what led to this whole movement, this whole one day, but just, I was really looking back to like, we were just talking with one of the guests before, and I'll introduce her in a moment, but she was mentioning about, being lost. And when I was really trying to discover my purpose, I was really asking, I was like, who am I? Why am I? And why bother? And it's, ultimately every day I have a choice to, not only remember that, but to sit in that and to focus on what moves me and what inspires me, and like, supporting people, empowering people, allowing people to share their stories, and really pointing us to this truth that, we seem to forget a lot, including myself, that we're all human, that we all not only laugh and cry the same, but we all have so much possibility. We all are capable of amazing, but also some horrible things. And when we stand in our power, and we actually recognize, focus, and experience the divine expression of the universe within ourselves, but also hold the space for that with others, there's only possibility. And why I'm doing this is I wanna hold you up. I want you to hold the gift that you are. I want to hold your story, and I want to not only learn from you, I want to thrive together. I want to be enriched by the gifts that you have to offer. And that's why we have this stage, and that's why I'm here speaking to you today. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for being here. Let me say hello and welcome our co-host, Matthew. Matthew, afternoon, buddy.
Hey, brother, man. That question, why bother? That
Mm-hmm.
one, that one got me. My version of that was, what's the point?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's the point? And I realized that was an issue for me, like that particular question, when I was back on Hawaii at some point, and I was just waking up miserable. Like, I didn't want to get out of bed. I'm on Hawaii. I didn't want to get out of bed. I was super depressed. And I just started really paying attention to what was going on in my head, like what that voice in my head was talking about. And I realized that was the question that kept coming up, like, what's the point? Like, what's the point of eating up today? Because it's always the same every single day, no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that was just such a depressing thought at the time that I didn't even want to get out of bed. But once I realized that's what was going on, once I realized what my mind was saying, and what that entire conversation was in my head about, like, it's always the same, everything, nothing changes, blah blah blah, et cetera, et cetera. What's the point of getting up? The counter that came to that was, I don't know. And that inspired possibility. Like, that when I that was the first day in the years, I when I realized what that question was saying, and all the implications of it were, and how heavy that thought was to me. That was the first day where I went, okay, well, let's go find out.
Mm-hmm.
And I got up, and I just went, and I showed up. Like, I just
Mm-hmm.
showed up, and magic started happening. Things that I never, like, would even consider, like stuff that, like,
Mm-hmm.
I never even imagined getting involved in, started becoming available just because I started showing up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What you're
And
saying, that's so powerful, man. Like, well, just like the word you said, like, stood out. A lot of things you said stood out, but when you said consider, like, for me, that was the discovery of like when I was willing, when I had the courage to be willing to consider. There's a way that's different than the way things are. Like, because I'm stuck in the loop. I'm stuck in the cycle of, living my life without really knowing my purpose. It's like, why should I do anything tomorrow or even today, if it's just going to be the same. It's like the movie Groundhog Day. It's one of my favorite movies. But like, it's when we actually consider who we're being, not only who we're being, but like, could there be another way? Like, maybe it's not set in stone. Maybe it's just I'm choosing to set it. Maybe it's my choice. Maybe I have a choice. And it's just like the considering of that is what opens up. Maybe you just peek. Maybe you're just looking out like, oh, maybe there's a little thing I could do, and you kind of peek around the corner, then you run back. But it's like every day we have that choice to run, like to open, not only jump out of our rabbit hole, but to like experience the world and to like not be held by any conceptual prison that we've limited ourselves to.
And that's it. Like it was a conceptual prison. Like I was trapped in this idea that it's always the same every single day. And that was the prison. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, how's it feel to be free?
Easy, man. Easy breezy. Like it's so relaxing. It's not even funny. And like the magic that just keeps showing up. Like another like just small conceptual prison was I was convinced that magic could happen on Hawaii, but it couldn't happen here in Tennessee. And so I've like this past year that I've been here in Tennessee, I've been kind of stepping outside of that prison and recognizing, oh yeah, magic can happen anywhere. It has nothing to do with where I'm at. It has everything to do with what I'm being, what I'm thinking.
Yeah, it's blows your mind. It blows my mind. It's like we're only limited to what we believe we're limited by. We're like, it's really our limitation is the concepts and the beliefs that we limit ourselves with, and it's a powerful thing to discover, and it's a daily thing for me. I want to now invite our first guest. I'm excited to have her. We have Anita Anantharam. Hope I said your name right. Welcome, Anita.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you. Thank you for being with us. Well, welcome to the stage. I'm just going to jump right in, if you're all right with it, to say, Anita, the stage is yours.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm just going to get started. So my name is Anita Anantharam. I am a professor, an entrepreneur, and a community builder. I've been teaching and working in higher education since 2003, first in California, and then now in Florida, where I live and work. And so I'm super excited to be here for this conversation about building community, because that is really the environment where I thrive. I'm an academic by day and an entrepreneur by night. And my students call me Dr. A. And I guess given my day job and my undercover life as an entrepreneur, it makes me feel like a superhero. And so I really embrace the Dr. A title, and I claim it like with pride. So I'm going to just sort of start with a quote from The Fellowship of the Ring by Tolkien. And it's just one line from a longer poem. And this quote like really speaks to me, because I think it really kind of captures and summarizes all the twists and turns of my own life. And, all of the different sort of things that I have done that sort of brought me to where I am today. With the really grateful for the opportunity to be standing here before you, or sitting here before you. So the quote is from Tolkien: "Not all those who wander are lost." And I really love this quote, because I think it sort of shows that what may seem like wandering to some people may actually be the wellspring of experience and knowledge for others. And as a teacher, I think it's really important to sort of keep that in mind. And I always try to kind of go back to that quote: "Not all those who wander are lost." And so, speaking for myself, what may have seemed like really disconnected, random, haphazard series of events and career choices has in fact opened up continually like new avenues of intellectual or personal and professional growth. And so I'm going to talk about and share my very non-linear pathway that sort of brought me here, and why I believe that it's really okay to wander as you figure out your life. It may in fact be like the best thing that you can do for yourself. But one caveat that I'm going to add to Tolkien's quote is just make sure that you're wandering with intention or wandering with purpose. And so as I sort of look back on my own life, that's sort of what I keep coming back to. Like, what is the intention? What is the purpose? So if you follow sports, you know that like in order to achieve like peak performance in their career, athletes often endure like thousands, if not tens of thousands of hours of like working on whatever skill they're working on. And this work is often like repetitive, like tedious, boring, painful, frustrating. Their routines may seem like super unreasonable or like crazy to those of us who don't understand the regimen or the routine that needs to be followed to achieve peak performance. Like some go through like extreme diets or follow strict nutrition plans. Others practice like meditation, mindfulness, breathing exercises, maybe OCD type like routines, wear the same clothes or whatnot. But in other words, their road to victory is sort of paved with intention and executed with precision. And those of us who are just sort of watching, we just watch them be really successful and just wonder with amazement, like, did they always know how to do this? Or, we don't really understand the process or the methodology for getting them to that peak performance level. So what may seem like effortless timing or super gifted skills or natural born talent to the audience is actually the result of fine tuning of their skills based on like hours and hours and hours of practice. And I'm telling you all this because, success is not like granted or like gifted. It does require a lot of hard work and failure and reset and the ability to sort of, pivot in all of these things. And so the best way that I found to sort of go through all of these things is to just keep moving forward and really be clear, about your personal mission statement. So not the kind of mission statement or purpose statement that you write for like college or graduate school life or professional life, but one that's really yours and for like your life. And so for me, that story has always revolved around issues of social justice. So my mission statement from when, I was a young child all the way in like middle school, high school, all of my curiosity was always sort of centered around issues of social justice or the differences like between people. I found feminism as an undergraduate student at Columbia University in New York, where I went to school. I was studying like medicine and biology because I'm the daughter of Asian immigrants. I really didn't have any other option. My life was sort of defined for me. And as immigrants, my parents really wanted like financial stability, and that was sort of the most important thing. And so, education and financial freedom were sort of like dinned into my head as like, this is kind of what you needed to do. And that was sort of the only option that I was given. And it was only years after I graduated when I really started reading more about like feminist practice, feminist texts, what they instilled in me, made me realize that, some of what they were saying, which I sort of rebelled against like very naturally as a child, may actually have been from a feminist perspective as well. Because again, a woman or everybody like needs money. As Virginia Woolf would say, money and a room of their own with a lock and key so that women could be like successful, right? If she wants to be a successful writer, she's going to need money and space. And so, I started to, after I finished my undergraduate life, I went on to graduate school to pursue a PhD in international and area studies at UC Berkeley. And I started to learn about the politics of immigration, migration, religious violence, nationalism, foreign policy. I was living in Berkeley, California, like sort of surrounded by activists and feminists. And every single day I was sort of reminded of the fact that the free speech movement had in fact started like on the campus of UC Berkeley only 30 years earlier. But when I was finishing my final year of my graduate work, the US like started their war in Iraq in 2003, 2004. And all of a sudden, all of the things that I was studying, like feminism, religious violence, fundamentalism, nationalism, Islamic culture, all of a sudden became super important to our government. But none of these things I could have predicted when I was wandering about my various areas of study, trying to figure out, like, what do I want to study? What do I want to do? What do I want to do with my life? So fast forward, I was hired by the University of Florida in 2007 to teach classes on transnational feminism, international food politics, post-colonial theory. And in 2008, like just as I had finished my first year of employment as an assistant professor at UF, the country was experiencing one of the worst economic depressions, right? Everybody that I knew was either out of a job or was having a hard time finding a job. And I had just completed my very first year of work. I was super grateful to be working. But I also recognized that, I was in a classroom, I was talking about these theoretical ideas about gender, diversity, literature, humanism, and that was certainly a privilege. Graduating students, the students that I was teaching, I knew were graduating without jobs. And at one point, like 40% of the students that were graduating that year in 2008 were either unemployed or underemployed. And everybody was like panicking and thinking about the value of education and the kinds of skills the market demanded. And I started to continue to write about the importance of feminism, diversity, and leadership in the workplace, emphasizing that the humanities and the social sciences should matter and do matter. All the things that our students were learning in the classroom were indeed relevant, like to the job market across industries. And so after I received tenure, so 7 years later, I was granted a sabbatical. I decided that I was going to go back to school and do my MBA. And I did this for two reasons. I was interested in how business executives thought about education and training. Particularly, how did business executives really feel about me and feel about the humanities and the social sciences as preparing students for employment? But I also wanted to get a better sense of, the world of finance and accounting and all of that, because I knew that it would help me in my own personal leadership growth. And so my decision to do my MBA seemed like yet another career pivot. And most of my friends and colleagues, and frankly, everyone around me, was asking me things like, why do you want to go to business school? Like, you're an academic, you don't really have any business skills. Like, you've turned over to the dark side. Don't you want to collect a paycheck and just be happy? You already have tenure, you have a job. Are you having a midlife crisis? So I was just getting all kinds of comments from people, but I decided that this is something that I wanted to do. My intention was I wanted to learn a little bit more about the people that were going to be hiring my students. And so let's try to set my students up for success. That was my intention. So what may again have seemed like a random wandering turned out to be one of the best decisions I made, and fortuitous timing, because exactly 1 year after I finished my MBA, the Me Too movement started, the Time's Up movements started, and movements for social justice, including Black Lives Matter, started. So all of a sudden, focusing on the lack of gender and diversity in the corporate workplace became a super hot topic to study and research. Suddenly, thinking about hiring practices, improving opportunities for women and underrepresented people in the workplace, all of a sudden it seemed relevant. And armed with an MBA, I was sort of like ready to take it all on. So I'm gonna stop there with my presentation, and hopefully we can have a conversation about this. But I wanted to sort of just close by sort of reminding everybody like how I opened my talk, right? Not all those who wander are lost. Maybe there is a purpose like to their wandering. And as long as you are being intentional and as long as you're sort of wandering with purpose, I think everything will turn out just okay. At least that's how it worked out for me. And I wouldn't just write off my life as lucky. I definitely think much of it was like tedious work and difficult work and very lonely work and felt very isolated and self-doubted myself a whole lot, but I continued on. And so my wandering with purpose has brought me here in front of all of you today. So I'll close with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, Anita. It's powerful for so many reasons. Just like you started with the background in in teaching and educating, and how you want to expand into community building. I think that's so admirable. And I'm curious, was there like a moment, like what made you willing to wander that direction? Now, what gave you that intention? Like, was it a curiosity? Was it a moment? Was it something, a lack? Was it a problem, or was it an opportunity? I'm curious. Was there an experience?
Like into the community building, like aspect?
Yeah, like what opened that door for you to even want to be considered looking there to where you are now?
I think a lot of it is just growing up as the daughter of two immigrants, Asian American, like immigrants from India, I always was sort of aware of the fact that, I was living this very dualistic life, right? Like what I was living at home and what I was experiencing at home, which is very different than like what I was experiencing like out, like in the community. And so I always kind of felt this need to have these conversations that were seemingly impossible conversations. And my parents were like a perfect like test case for that, because like I had to take the things that I was learning, things that I was seeing around me, and sort of like bringing it back home and sort of say to my parents, like, well, let's talk about this issue or let's talk about that issue. And they were like, and they didn't understand a lot of the things that I was sort of bringing to the table. Right. And so I think it has a lot to do with the fact that I grew up, I almost felt like with two very different identities. The Anita that's out in New York, at Columbia, like doing things, reading certain types of books, and then like going home and, talking to my parents about the things that I'm learning. And they're like, are you going to make money one day? Like, are you going to have a job? Like we left India to come here, and you're studying Indian culture. Like, what's going on with that? Right. So it was like, why aren't you, why are you doing all these things that are probably going to completely like cause you financial like instability, right? And so I felt like having impossible, difficult conversations was sort of just, I don't want to say it was just like natural, but it was like necessity. It was like necessity to survive, and like it was necessary for me to do that in order to be able to, still be a good Indian girl and be at home like with my family, and also be out doing what I wanted to do. I don't know if that made sense or if I answered the question at all, Abram.
Absolutely. No, I think that's wonderful. And I think, well, like what I hear you saying is, how your definition of success, it's because your parents had a definition of success, coming from India, but your definition of success wasn't just making a living. It was going beyond that. It was your purpose. And I think that's ultimately, that pays the bills more than money,
Right. Yeah. And I mean, and I'm doing all right. I can't complain. I have a job, and I'm, I've got like job stability and all of this, with tenure and all of that, like now. So like now my parents are like relaxed. It's my mom's birthday today. So, I had a long conversation with her this morning about her own life, and it just sort of seemed like she was finally at a place where she was like, everyone's doing okay, and it was all like, everything worked out, right? And so yeah, I do think purpose has a lot to do with it, and you sort of really hit the nail on the head with like definitions of success, because I think success looks very different, like to different people, and you just have to, being able to recognize that and being able to own that and say, like maybe this is not what success looks like for me, and that I'm not just going to be put into this track. Because a lot of people, if you follow that mindset, a lot of people then suddenly wake up at some point and then realize, what have I been doing?
Right.
I totally hate this job. Like, why am I an accountant? I don't even like what I do. Right.
Yeah.
And that's still okay. It's better to discover that than to never discover it. But I think the earlier you can sort of figure out your purpose or your mission, or, so one exercise I always do, like with all my students, and I started with myself and did this, was writing that sort of purpose statement, writing that mission statement. Like what would that look like, right? Companies have mission statements all the time, but we don't as individuals. So
Right.
what would that mission statement look like for me?
Right.
Once you can kind of have that, it at least gives you a map, and then you can wander away and stumble upon, different adventures and land where you land. But at least then you've always got like a little blueprint or a little map that sort of says, okay, these are the things that are important to me.
Yeah.
So how am I honoring that, and how am I being intentional about the things that I'm doing, so that it always sort of comes back to, your original like purpose.
Yeah. That's so powerful, just everything you're saying, but it's like there's a cost, back to I love the theme of wandering. It's like there's a cost to not allowing ourselves to wander. Whether whether we do it, we follow our passions or not, whether we choose to seek and discover that for ourselves and stand in our purpose, we will feel it will affect us whether we do that, we stand in it or not. And I feel like there's a cost, to live life how we think it has to be or how others tell us it needs to be. And it's like, there's an existential cost to standing in, just wandering. Like wandering is so powerful, and it's, I have a lyric I wrote a long time ago. I don't. It's funny, I don't remember exactly, but it's like, you can't get lost. You can't find yourself without getting lost. You can't. It's like, and I feel you need to be able to just wander and find yourself in the world to be able to see not only what's important to you, but to see what lights you up, to see what fills you up.
Right. Absolutely. That's exactly right. So I was actually like trying to see if I could find the full 6 or 7 lines of the poem by Tolkien, but I'm not able to find it. So, but anyway, but if you find it at some point, it's actually really great, because it really talks about it opens with the not all those who wander are lost, and it sort of ends with the Fellowship of the Ring, who will be king. So it's really beautiful, and I think it's worth reading at some point. But
beautiful.
If we can find it, we'll bring it up at the very end.
Yeah, or if I find it, I'll share.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of what you have discussed and what you and April have been talking about kind of takes me back to this idea that it's fun to play with, at least for me anyways, that everyone has 3 questions. There's the question their mom was born with, the question their dad was born with, and the question they were born with. And I love playing with this idea because it points back to, actually, there's a different way to say that. It invites a bigger perspective, one of a lifetime journey of learning.
Mm-hmm.
Like stepping back into that question of, what did I come here to discover for myself? What did I come here to be?
Right.
And I wonder, if you had to name your 3 questions, could you? And what would they be?
Oh, that's great. I don't know. So what were the questions again? What am I what
the question that your mom came into this world to answer, the question your dad came into this world to answer, and the question that you came into this world to answer.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it would be easier for me to sort of think about myself, and I don't know if I have a specific question, but I know where I feel the most excited and where I feel like I'm just totally in my element, and I'm in my zone, is when I am, really building connections for my students, and I'm really building when I sort of see them come alive, and you can sort of see that they're starting to become more confident about their own values, their own mission or purpose or whatever that might be. That's when I feel like I'm exactly where I want to be, right? When I'm sort of in that environment. So I don't think it's a question as much as a place. if that makes sense, right? It's like where I am and where I feel like this is what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. And this is like, I'm loving it. And it doesn't feel like work because I could do hours and hours and hours of that type of work, and just time will just keep flying by. And I don't feel like I'm overworked. I don't feel exhausted. Like, I just feel like this is what I'm supposed to do. If that makes sense. Like, we've all had jobs, right? I mean, I think like Chris Rock has a great like skit where he's talking about the difference between like, a job and a career. And when you're, he sort of explains like how when he was working, like washing dishes, like he would just keep staring at the clock, and it's like only been 5 minutes, even though it felt like he had been working for hours and it only 5 minutes had passed on the clock. But when you're like, when you're doing something that you love, like you kind of do it all the time and it doesn't feel like work. It just doesn't feel like, I don't look at the clock and say, oh, I'm done with this. Like, I got to go, it just feels like that's what I'm supposed to be doing. So I don't know if that's a long-winded way of like not answering your question, but it's sort of the best way is like, I know what it feels like when I'm there. So,
yeah.
I love it. Yeah. Thank you. There is a question that comes up, maybe a starting point for you, maybe not, I don't know. But the question that came up as you were sharing all that is, what can I become that inspires others to be greater?
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. That sounds great. I'll borrow that line. That can be my tagline,
Yeah. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Anita, for sharing. We're going to check back with you in just a little bit. We're going to invite our second guest in just a moment, but thank you for sharing your story. Really appreciate you and just honored to have you. And thank you for tuning in with us. Again, I want to take this opportunity just to invite you to share your unique gift, your unique genius on this stage with us. That's why we're here. That's why we hold this space, is for you to share your story, your transformation of how and what you discovered to see in your truest self and your real, authentic, true self. Who are you being in this world, and how did you discover that? What did you have to overcome and face? We want to hear about that, because I know you, like all humans, are like a diamond in a pearl. Like each of us, our beauty really shines when life tests us and we're under pressure. That's when we actually, something on the other end of that is the most beautiful thing we can discover. And I want to hear your stories. So that's why this is why we hold this space. And our mission here is bringing you and me and communities together in joyous celebration, unifying humanity in our diversity to create a better world for us all. And that's why we're here. Now I'd like to welcome our second guest. We have James D. Feldman. James, thank you for joining us.
How are you?
Doing fantastic. We're happy to have you. I'm really excited to hear your story. You mentioned you've been an entrepreneur since you were 7, so I just want to have you jump in if you're all right with that.
So I'm at the opposite end of the spectrum of Anita, so it's a great comparison. So let me describe who I am. I'm a nowist, and I identify what can be done now to discover new opportunities on your journey to bright ideas for your recession, revenue, rescue. And with everybody struggling, with everything that's going on, my mission is to help people pivot, to get through this mess by explaining to them how I think differently. And I'm probably wired the exact opposite of Anita. I get up every morning and I have a different mission. How do I make another dollar? How do I help my customers make another dollar? And how do we get through the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months where the playing field has been totally leveled? So let me give you a little background and you'll understand who I am. When I was 7 years old, I went to my mother and I said, "Hi, I'd like an allowance." She stared at me. She says, "Go ask your father." So I marched into the next room and I said, "Hi, Dad, I'd like an allowance." He goes, "Go ask your mother." My first business lesson at 7 years old was get all the decision makers in the room at the same time. And so I went back and I got my mother and I brought her into the room and I said, let's both sit down with Dad and let's hash this out. And they stood in a very unified position going, we're not giving you an allowance. However, we admire your entrepreneurial spirit. I didn't know what that was at the time, but they were teeing me up for, you want money, go out and earn it. You can walk the dog, you can wash the car, you can mow the yard, you can open up a lemonade stand. So I went outside, I looked down the street both directions, and there were lemonade stands on every driveway as far as I could see. You see, I lived in an area that was all professionals. It was all white collar. And so every kid was out there with a lemonade stand. And some of them were selling cookies and other things to go along with what was going on with their lemonade stand. So when I came back inside and thought through the problem, I went back to my mother and I said, the next time we're going to Shoppers World, which was sort of a precursor to a Sam's Club or a Costco or a Walmart, you know, a big box store. She said, I can go today. And we got there and I said, I'll meet you back here in 30 minutes. And I priced out bulk sugar, bulk lemonade, bulk paper cups, and little Ziploc bags. And I calculated what it would take to make a quart of lemonade using all my bulk supplies and how many glasses or cups would be depleted in each of those containers. At night, I went to the doors of everybody who had a lemonade stand, knocked on the door, and sold them my lemonade kit. I never was outside in the heat. I only worked from roughly 6:30 to about 8. And at the end of the summer, having never been outside, having never opened up a lemonade stand, I had $351 in the bank. And I realized lesson number 2 was, if you can't be the best at what you do, service those people who are better at doing what you want to do. So I became a vendor. I became a supplier. And most of my life, I have become the guy who matches up the production side through the distribution channel to the end consumer. And I've done that time and time again. But the biggest test I faced in my life came when I was in law school. And in law school, we had study groups. And I got a phone call from one of the guys in the study group, and he goes, Feldman, I'm not going to make our Saturday meeting because I've got to go adjust a railroad car. What does that mean, adjust a railroad car? You know, adjust a railroad car. I don't get it. Well, I'm an insurance adjuster. And my insurance company paid a claim on a missing boxcar, and now they found the boxcar, and I've got to go find that boxcar in the shipping yard, open it up, see what's inside, and then try to get some money for whatever the contents are. I said, this is like Christmas. I got to go with you. So 110 degrees. We go to the Antioch, Topeka, and Santa Fe switching yard, which was thousands of acres as far as I could see, with railroad cars everywhere. We finally found it. It was locked. Had to go back to the main place, get a bolt cutter, go back out again, cut it open, and discovered restaurant size number 10 cans filled with Chef Boyardee spaghetti sauce. Now, this guy and I are standing there looking at this boxcar, which, by the way, was about 60 feet long, about 20 feet high, and 4.85 inches wide. There's no manifest. I don't know how many cans are in there. I don't know what this represents. All I know is it's a lot of pasta sauce. I mean, a lot. So I'm looking at this guy and I said, now what? He goes, I don't know. I said, well, what would you do? He says, well, I'd try to figure out who I could sell it to. And I said, well, if you could get somebody to take off your hands today, right this minute, what would you take? He goes, this minute, in this heat, right now, $5,000. Sold. That's right, sold. My quick calculation was that I couldn't possibly lose any money. There had to be more than $5,000 worth of value in that boxcar. So I bought it. Now, the funny part was I didn't have $5,000. So I had to go to the bank. The bank thought I had totally lost it, as I'm sure most of you that are listening right now going, what was this guy thinking? And they said, listen, the only way we're going to give you the money, bucko, is if you bring us your camera equipment. And we're going to lock up your camera equipment in the safe, and we'll give you the money. So sure enough, they gave me the money. I called the guy. I said, I've got the money. I'll bring you a cashier's check. He goes, great, it's yours. Now, that's Thursday. Friday morning, I'm basking in my brilliance, and the phone rings, and he goes, Mr. Feldman, I'm Tim Schmidt from the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad. Did you buy boxcar WDM 1962? I said, yeah, why? He says, move it. What? Move it. You didn't think you were going to let it sit here. Now, I don't know how to move a railroad car. He says, you've got a caboose, right? And you've got a locomotive, right? You've got an engineer, right? And you got a trainman, right? And you got the easement rights to move it across the railroad tracks. No. He says, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. You bought a railroad car and you don't have a way to move it. I go, correct. He goes, listen, this is your lucky day. I'm off for the weekend. I'm taking a couple of extra days. I won't be back to work until Wednesday. Wednesday morning, I need you to have it gone. So I went back to my group on Saturday. I bought some beer. I bought some pizza. And we played the what if game. And the what if game is the same for every problem you're ever going to solve. What if? What's next? What's possible? And why not? So I reasoned that the car was going somewhere, right? Yeah, of course. Where was it going? Had to be a big user. So I made a list with my group. Prisons, hospitals, military. I'm on a roll. I love this idea. Monday morning, I'm on the phone. I find a military base. The guy says, what's the product code? What? Back in the car, back to the railroad yard. They'd move my car. Took me almost 2 hours to find it. Crawl in, find the product code, go back, call him back. He says, okay, I'll take it. Meantime, I had calculated the volume of what must be inside. I did the cubic size of the railroad car, the size of a number 10 can, how many gallons it would hold. And I came up with the fact that it was about 33,000 gallons. Don't forget, I paid $5,000 for 33,000, so I'm in it relatively cheaply. Guy says to me, tell you what, kid, I'll buy it from you. $2 a gallon. Do we have a deal? You drive a hard bargain, but okay. I'm dancing. I can't be happier, right? Well, here's the problem, guys. He says, what's your GSA number? What's that mean? Well, you need a government supply number to sell it to somebody that's a government organization. I don't have one. Don't worry, I'll mail you the forms. You mail them to Washington. You get them back in a couple of weeks. We got a deal. No, I don't have time. Went back to the hospital, same thing. Went back to the prison, same thing. So what do? Instead of where was it going to, where was it coming from? So this is how you pivot. This is how you think through problems. And I refer to that now as going inside the box. Remember, a railroad car is also called a boxcar. So I go inside the box. What do I know about the box? I know how many gallons I have, roughly. I know they're number 10 cans, so it's not a consumer product. I know it was going somewhere. How do I know? Because it was going somewhere. I knew it came from somewhere. So since going to wasn't going to work, I decided to focus on where was it coming from, and I found the manufacturer. I got a hold of the manufacturer. The young lady at the desk was kind enough to tell me what I needed to know, which was roughly what was the cost of producing a gallon of sauce to them. And she said, best as I can tell from these reports, somewhere around $3, including boxing, promotion, marketing, etc. Okay. So if I can sell it to him for $2, I got the same deal that I had with the military base. I'm in great shape. Product manager gets on the phone and he says, what's the product code? I give it to him. He goes, where is it? I said, Topeka. He says, listen, I don't want to hassle with you. He says, I'll give you $1.50 a gallon. Do we have a deal? I said, no. Now I know what you're saying. Jim is crazier than I thought he was 10 minutes ago. He's got a buyer. He's got an economic decision maker. Why is he turning it down? Because I haven't really articulated the whole problem. Have you figured it out? What are my assets? I've got 33,000 gallons of pasta sauce. And I have a boxcar. Most people ignore the boxcar when I tell this story. A boxcar today is between $150,000 and $200,000. I said to the guy, how much will you give me for the boxcar? He says, why do I want to do that? I said, because otherwise I got to take the product out. It's going to be a mess. You're going to have to load it in another boxcar. You're going to have to get trailer trucks. This is clean. You buy the contents, you buy the boxcar, and we got a deal. He says, I don't want to mess around. He says, I'll give you $35,000. Now we're talking. Do the math. I'm back to where I was. And here's the last part. This is not a one-off deal. If this guy is adjusting railroad cars, I want to be a part of the next one. And so I called him up. I thanked him and I said, I want to thank you for bringing me over there. I'm going to give you $5,000. He was thrilled. He was blown away. Now, how did I come up with the $5,000? Because he knew that's what I paid for the railroad car. I also went back to the guy from the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad, and I gave him $5,000. Now, you might say, why is Jim being so generous? Because, ladies and gentlemen, I want to do it again. And I don't want to have to fight with other people in a bid war. So I have primed the pump before it's dry. At the end of the day, I worked for 4 days and I cleared, well, you do the math, a lot of money, and certainly more than I cleared for my lemonade stand. And so I have taken that information and I have applied it to my latest book, which I wrote during COVID. And it's called Shift Happens, No Job, No Money, Now What? And it's a book filled with these tips and insights on how to reinvent yourself by using 3D thinking, which is going inside the box. Inside the box is the depth. That's what the problem is and what makes up the problem. Number 2 is the distance. Who are you going to sell it to? If you don't have anybody that's going to buy your solution, then all you've got is a hobby. And then lastly is your determination. Depth, distance, and determination make up 3D thinking. And 3D thinking is what distinguishes all of us in problem solving. If you notice behind me, you see Dr. Travel book, Dating Your Customer book, Shift Happens. I've written 13 books because I wanted to leave a legacy of how I think and the problems that I've solved so that people can emulate what worked and what didn't work. Now, I realized during COVID, as I wrote the book, we didn't need another book. But what we did need was a toolbox. We needed a way to create a vision where others aren't looking, to understand a solution that others aren't grasping, and to apply common sense. This is a book that you would buy like you would buy a Swiss Army knife. A Swiss Army knife has dozens of tools, but you don't know which tool you're going to need until you're at that point where you're looking for one of the tools in the Swiss Army knife or one of the tools in your toolbox. This is a book that will help you pivot. This is a book that will help you articulate where you are now and where you want to be tomorrow. Look, I promise you we're going to get out of COVID and pandemic. But I can also tell you that we've leveled the playing field. And there's nobody, or let's say very few, that are on solid footing. Who would have thought 6 months ago toilet paper would be more expensive than gold? Who thought we would run out of hand sanitizers and bleach? Who ever thought we would be in this precarious situation where our government made huge mistakes on how to deal with the COVID? We saved 200,000 people and we put 32 or 42 million people out of work. I am in no way trying to trivialize the death of 200,000 people. But at the same time, I want to weigh the fact that while those people have passed on, we now have 32 million people struggling with their own survival and not knowing where their next meal is going to come from or what's going to be on the other side. And so as I wrote the book, I was on a mission. I was driven to try to help people understand how to survive and then thrive. And if you want to get a copy of the book, I've made it very simple. You go to JFA, that's James Feldman Associates, .tips, TIPS/Amazon. Now the book is a toolbox. But along with a toolbox, you need a mentor. You need somebody to help you figure out why you would use a hammer rather than a screwdriver. So part of the uniqueness of the book is it comes with one-on-one coaching. That's right, one-on-one coaching to help you get through and create your own new recession revenue rescue. I call this a self-help book that is weighted in the end results. I often say to people, figure out the end result first and then create the path to get there because it's easier to see. You can do it. Never give up. We all have those times where we think this is it and I don't have any more fuel in the fuel tank. Look at the sign that I've just put up and put it into your memory. Take a snapshot, do a screenshot. Never, ever, ever give up. From the 7-year-old kid that started selling lemonade kits to someone that took the contents of a railroad car and turned it into tens of thousands of dollars of profit, who found the time and the focus to write 13 books, and who has changed the lives of tens of thousands of people through my public speaking, through my writing, and through my advising. Never, ever give up, because shift happens to all of us, and it's going to continue to shift. It's not about what to think, it's how to think. Thanks for giving me a few minutes of your time. I hope I've given you some food for thought as you create your journey for your recession revenue rescue.
Thank you so much, James. That was quite a story and an adventure. Wow, just like the lemonade stand to the rail car, like you were born with this intuition to to think inside the box, this new frame of thinking. But well, first of all, thank you for sharing the story and just sharing, your experiences and on our stage. And I'm just curious, what happened between like it sounds like you were like this how this story came about, and this how the shift, change is such a constant, and and everybody is facing code right now. Obviously what happened this last year, obviously with the pandemic, the unrest, with just all the division and separateness. So you've seen, with no pun intended, on the rails of, I mean, it's like nothing diverted you from this core point that, it's the only constant. And I'm just curious, what do you see opening up with COVID, with I guess what I like to call the collateral duty, like with the are struggling, like what opportunity do we have as individuals and collectively, just based off what you're saying of how we can actually use the shift to create something bigger?
Well, first of all, I don't ever think we're going to return to quote unquote normal. Mm-hmm. I think it's a new normal. Look at what happened with the number of Zoom calls that went from, a couple of million to 20 million to 50 million. I mean, one of the things we all should have done is bought stock in Zoom like the beginning of March. But as you look at the emergence that's going to come out of this, there's going to be more millionaires, more billionaires created as a direct result of this COVID and pandemic than ever in our history. Unfortunately for me, it's going to be kids that are 12 years old and 15 years old and 20 years old that have really grown up with technology and understand how to do this. But for me, they don't necessarily know how to monetize it. And that's where I come in. So while I'm not a technology guru, I'm a let's figure out how to make a buck guru. And I try to tell everybody that if you're not monetizing your intellectual property, it's a hobby. And that's not to take away from anybody. Maybe that's what they want. I refer to this. Knowledge today is free. You want to learn how to do brain surgery? I am sure that there is a YouTube video out there that'll teach me how to do brain surgery. What it doesn't tell me is don't do it on yourself. It doesn't give me that next step. And what we need is we need to go back to the people that have been down that path, like Anita, like myself, who have walked that walk and can help guide others. And so you try to set up some way of doing this on a JV. One of my favorite conversations always is when I get a phone call from a nonprofit or a not-for-profit, and they go, "We can't pay you because we're a nonprofit." And I go, "Well, guess what? I am a for-profit, so this isn't going to work. But let me give you my only free advice to you because I will charge you for everything else." Not-for-profit is a tax status, not a business model. You still have to make money no matter what you do. And so it sort of turns people off when I say that, but suddenly they go back and go, he's right. How are we going to pay the electric bill? How are we going to pay me? We're not in a barter society. We're in a currency society. And at the end of every day, your net profit is that you kept more than you spent. It's a simple equation. And because it's exponential these days, and because it's no longer limited by geography, I can do a webinar that goes worldwide. And let's say for conversation, I charge $1, but I get 10,000 people to sign up for it. Look at the number of people on TikTok that do a 15-second dance and are making money hand over fist. I used to be a big critic of the Kardashians. I'm not anymore. I love the Kardashians. They have figured out how to leverage social media and turn it into a multi-billion-dollar industry. My hat's off to them. I'm jealous. Unfortunately, I don't look like any of them, so it's probably not going to work. But when you think about it, what is their product? Their product is themselves. And then they've taken that and they've moved it into cosmetics and hair care and clothing and other things that they can monetize. So to your point, you just have to sit down and you have to say to yourself, what if, what's next, what's possible, and why not?
I love those questions. I brought Anita back on because I want to hear her answer to Abram's question as well. What possibilities do you see in the collateral beauty of COVID? But there is something you just said earlier, James, I'd like to pull out just for a little bit more detail. We are not in a barter society. We are in a money society, basically. And that goes back to the broader context of this conversation, that most of what we're talking about only applies within the context of our current system and the current economy. And one of the things that I really appreciate about some of the conversations that have come out of COVID is more and more people are becoming aware of the total impact of our economy. I'm not saying this is good, bad, right, or wrong. It's just there is more cost to our economy than what most people seem to be aware of. And that includes the damage to indigenous cultures in South America and third world countries. It includes, all of everything that comes about because of the lifestyle that we're living here and the way we've built that lifestyle. And so all that being said, Anita, what do you see as one of the as a collateral beauty out of COVID, and also to everyone here, I guess, does the context that our society has been built on still apply, and is it still useful, or is it time to start looking at ways to move away and create a different context?
Are you asking me to answer that, or is James for James?
You first. Yeah, you first.
Yeah, I mean, I'll COVID has definitely challenged or has compelled people to sort of really rethink a lot of assumptions that they had about work, for example, right? Working from home is something that no corporation really wanted to consider as a regular part of someone's work schedule or whatnot. But now it's sort of become I think more and more companies are sort of recognizing that, maybe we do need to rethink some of our policies. And so that's just one example that I can think of. But I definitely think that I'll let James sort of jump back in to respond to your question. But to your point, I think there's two things that come to mind. One, my students anyway right now are deeply skeptical about capitalism, super angry about social injustice. Most of my students that I work with are first generation college students, Black, Indigenous students of color. And so for the first time, there is this larger conversation that they're forcing us to have that I think is really, really important and needs to happen. And I don't think that, I think this is not to, obviously racism has always existed in our country, right? But I think there's something about COVID with the larger social, what happened to George Floyd, for example, has sort of really brought people together to talk about or really rethink how capitalism works. I have seen, at least here in Gainesville, Florida, this whole community that has just popped up online that is all about bartering. I've got an extra washing machine. You've got some plants. I don't need a washing machine. I need some plants. Let's do a trade. And it's entirely barter system. And this whole new platform, right? People are using social media for this exchange. There's no money exchanged in this process. And it is, and I see a lot of my students that are very, very actively involved in this because they're also all about the environment and things like that. So I do think that, we do need those of us that are in business who want to work with this generation, we can either write them off and say, well, you're never going to make any money, or a lot of like us who aren't in business did think about buying Zoom way before Zoom became profitable, because we had been using Zoom for the last 2 years. Like, I have been using Zoom as my primary platform for my online classes. So like, I saw the writing on the wall when COVID came, right? Like, it was what was really, well, anyway, so that's a separate conversation, James, you and I can have offline. But anyway, my point being, there are these opportunities, I think, that businesses have right now to collaborate with those of us who have been doing this work for a very long time, like doing the sort of social justice work, the feminist work, the humanities work that, all of the doctors in my family just like laughed at for years, like, so I think it's a real opportunity here that we have for businesses to sort of come together to come up with some creative solutions to the mess that we're in, and really draw inspiration from like your experiences, James, that it would have never occurred to me to do half the things you did. But, like I dropped in the comment earlier, LOL, we'd make a great team, like we think very differently, but, we could, but just think of like, the opportunities that can be created when you bring very different people who work in very different environments, who have very different like mindsets and brains and how they're hardwired together to solve a particular problem, instead of like the usual suspects that are always being brought to the table to solve the problems over and over again. So that's my answer to you, Matt.
I love that. Yeah. And I appreciate the you pulled out that like we're not going to get anywhere with the same type of thinking that got us here in the first place.
Yeah.
Like that's.
Oh yeah, that's
right.
It just
I have been an advocate of barter my entire life.
Yeah.
Because there's always a situation where someone has something that they don't value as much as I do, and I have something that I don't value as much as
Right.
they do, and you have a meeting of the minds. I mean, I live in Chicago. So as an example, I needed to get in to see a doctor. The doctor's appointments were all shut down because of COVID, et cetera, et cetera. And I said to the nurse, I said, you remember me, don't you? She goes, no. I said, I'm the guy who brought you the chocolate last year that you ended up giving to your daughter because you didn't have a birthday present. And then you got another box that I brought you for yourself. She goes, oh, yes, I remember you. How does tomorrow at 3:00 work out?
That's funny.
Now, some people would be critical of me saying, well, but what about everybody else? And I'm sorry, I'm selfish. It's my life we're talking about here. I needed to get in, and frankly, the other people aren't my problem. And I don't mean to be mean-spirited about it, but they're not in the same thing. I had a shooting pain. It was creating a real issue for me. And they're saying, we'll see you in, 3 months. I'm thinking 3 minutes is too long at that point in my life. There's a very quick story I want to share because I think Anita will want to steal it from me. God is cleaning out his closet and he finds commandments. So he goes down to earth and he says to the Egyptians, hey, you want some commandments? Now we're busy building pyramids. You see, for the Romans, hey, you want some commandments? Nah, we're busy building roads. And wandering through the desert is Moses. And he says, Moses, you want some commandments? He goes, how much are they? He says, they're free. He says, okay, I'll take 10.
Bravo.
See how I wove that into your wandering?
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Anita, we need to trade email addresses at the least.
Absolutely.
Wow. I mean, there's so many things that were just shared. One of the things that I just kind of connecting some dots that were all just shared is one of the things that I see in the collateral beauty of COVID is it's the collaboration.
Right.
It's just kind of where what people value and need meets what we all have to share, and to like what I have to share somebody like James saying, we might find different values depending on who you are and where you are at in your life or in your day. And I see the collaboration factor that it's like what you were saying about George Floyd. It's like when COVID's opened up. It's like I feel like never in this time more than ever, at least in my life, have I seen people more observant of other people's suffering and more willing to support people who are like, it's like, what can I do to help? What can I do to support people? And it's like, no matter where we are, what our gifts are, what we have to sell, you know, ultimately, I think everybody wants their family, their friends, and their neighbor's family and their neighbor's friends to be healthy and safe. And that's kind of what's opening. It's like we're more aware of each other's suffering, or more aware of each other's pain. And I think in turn that opens up, you know, our own awareness to our own power in every moment to actually contribute to someone else's joy, to someone else's, you know, when we can actually say, oh, this person's hurting. What can I do? Or what, like, how can I, if not alleviate their suffering, what can I do to make it better for them and make the world better for them and their experience? So, I mean, that's what I see. And I think, you know, I just really appreciate it. This has been such a dynamic conversation, and I love the extremes of where you both came from, but also just how it meets in the middle of.
We're meeting in the middle.
Yeah, and this is like an actualization of what community building is for me, but also just, you know, when we actually show up to ourselves authentically and to each other, we can actually create new conversations where we can actually all win. Where you're better off, I'm better off because you're better off. And I think that's ultimately, you know, the conversation I see. The humanity, we have a choice for every day and right now, and like that's what we're choosing here one day is, you know, I can choose to make your life better because it makes my life better, and I can choose to make your family's life better because it makes my family's life better. And it's like, you know, ultimately, you know, we can't sweep under the rug any more of our collective generational physical, emotional pain, or psychological, emotional, spiritual toxicities. Like it all bubbles up in this world because of how interconnected we are.
Right.
I'm just so thrilled to have you both. I want to give this has been a really exciting conversation. I want to just say, if anything else anyone wants to share to close off before we end this.
Real quick, yeah, because that actually brings us almost full circle back to where you opened up, Anita, with those really deep, hard conversations. And there was a question that came when you were sharing that, and sharing that and talking about community building. And it was, what is the glue that bonds community together? And I feel like I just got an answer, which is, what is the glue that bonds community together? And I feel like a glue is conversation, like these really deep conversations that we have.
Right.
And like that's like that. I really just enjoyed just watching you and James come together and like a meeting of minds, and like now there's a new community that is forming right here live.
But here's the problem, Matthew. When we watch what happened to George Floyd, which was tragic, did you notice how many people were observing and doing nothing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Then you have an entire movement start, and yet every single day you see some other grievance that occurs because no one learned from what took place with George Floyd.
And that's where I feel like the power of the internet really comes into play.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as much as I hope I am wrong, after November 3rd, 50% of the people in this country are not going to be happy with the outcome. And I am very nervous about what's going to take place, no matter who wins. No matter who wins.
I understand that. It's not something I share anymore. At one point, I was very nervous about all this, but like I had to take a step back and go, okay, what's the biggest picture here? And the biggest one that I see in this current moment is the question of what is the lesson that the United States of America is learning from this experience? Like, what are we as humans that have come together in a community that's called the United States of America? What are we learning? And something that like I've noticed long term, and even like this kind of goes back to something Jesus said, which is always fun for me to bring up because I don't identify as Christian anymore, but all things work towards good for those who love. And like I feel like that is the deeper meaning to me, is when you step back and step away from the ideas of right and wrong, good, bad, and just look at the biggest picture of, what are we learning? Then that possibility of all the drama that's happening shifts into, oh, what is this birthing? What can this become? What can we create out of the lessons that we're learning from all this drama and all this pain and all this suffering? And what new, better, amazing world can we create because that happened?
Couldn't agree more.
Wow. Thank you all again for sharing. Anita, James, it's been an amazing conversation. I learned so much. I want to have you both back and share some more stories. And this has been just been an honor and a privilege to have you both. So thank you for being here. I love where this conversation went. Again, I never really know where to expect where it goes. And it's just like another example of just like, it's always humbling to just see this, how it all comes full circle without us even trying. And it's just like, it's beautiful for me. So just thank you for being here. I really just appreciate you sharing yourself and your gifts and your stories. So thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. And thank you at home for you tuning in, or if you're in your car or if you're on a boat or wherever you are. Thank you for tuning in. Again, I just want to invite you to share your story on this stage. This is why we're here, is for you to share your gifts, your genius, your contribution. This is your space to share it yourself. This is why we're here, is for you to share what you've been through and what you've learned through your experiences and what's opened up on the other side of that. And that's what ultimately that's what our one day vision is humanity rising in a connected world with each person's unique contributions being valued and magnified through a higher level of collaboration, producing unprecedented new realms of possibility. Thank you all. We'll see you on Thursday. I love you all. Be safe, be well, and as always, one day is today. Take care, everybody.